Admiral John Carter stared at the holographic display in the command center of Earth Defense Station Alpha. The strange object had appeared at the edge of the solar system just hours ago. It moved unlike anything humans had built, with impossible speed and precision. "Any response to our hails?" Carter asked, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. Lieutenant Amy Davis shook her head. "Nothing yet, sir. Wait. Incoming transmission." The central screen flickered, revealing a being unlike anything humans had ever seen. Its skin was pale blue with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move. 4 dark eyes blinked independently at the camera. "Greetings, humans of Earth. I am Zorteth, ambassador of the Vexari Conclave. We come with peaceful intentions and wish to establish diplomatic relations with your species." Carter straightened his uniform. "This is Admiral John Carter of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We welcome peaceful contact. How may we assist you, Ambassador?" "We request a formal meeting to discuss matters of mutual benefit. Our scans indicate your world possesses resources of interest to us." Carter frowned slightly but maintained his diplomatic expression. "We would be happy to arrange a meeting. Perhaps our orbital diplomatic station would be suitable." "That would be acceptable. We will arrive in 20 of your Earth hours." The screen went dark. "Get me the Security Council," Carter ordered. "And find Dr. Lisa Winters. If we're going to talk to these aliens, we need our best linguist." Dr. Lisa Winters had been woken at 3 a.m. and rushed to the station on a hypersonic transport. She now sat in the briefing room, reviewing the first contact footage for the 5th time. "Their language patterns are fascinating," she said. "They're speaking perfect English, but the subvocal harmonics suggest they're using some kind of translation technology." "Can they be trusted?" asked Carter. Lisa shrugged. "Impossible to say yet, but there's something in their phrasing that concerns me." They mentioned resources of interest very early in the conversation. Security Chief Paul Bennett leaned forward. "I don't like it. They show up unannounced and immediately want to talk about our resources. Sounds like colonial language to me." "Let's not jump to conclusions," Carter said. "But we'll be prepared for anything." The Vexari shuttle docked with the Unity station 18 hours later. Carter, Winters, and a small diplomatic team greeted the aliens. Zorteth was accompanied by 3 other Vexari, all wearing what appeared to be ceremonial armor that shimmered with embedded technology. In the station's conference room, the humans and aliens sat across from each other. Station cameras recorded everything as Carter opened the talks. "We're honored to welcome representatives of the Vexari Conclave. We look forward to learning about your civilization." Zorteth's mouthparts moved in what might have been a smile. "The honor is ours, Admiral. The Vexari Conclave spans hundreds of star systems. We have guided many young civilizations into the galactic community." "And what form does this guidance take?" Lisa asked carefully. "Protection, primarily. The galaxy is filled with dangers your species cannot imagine. In exchange for this protection, we request access to certain resources." Carter kept his expression neutral. "What resources would those be?" "Your world is abundant in liquid water. We would require 30% of your global supply." The humans exchanged shocked glances. Carter maintained his composure. "That's a significant request. Water is essential to all life on Earth." "It is a reasonable proposal," Zorteth said, the patterns on his skin darkening. "Many civilizations have benefited from our protection. The alternative arrangements have been less favorable to developing species." "And if we were to decline?" Carter asked. Zorteth's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "That would be unfortunate for your species." The room fell silent. Carter nodded slowly. "We will need to consult with Earth's leadership regarding your proposal. Perhaps we could arrange accommodations for you while we consider. We will return to our vessel. You have 48 Earth hours to provide your answer." The Vexari rose as one and left the conference room. Once they were gone, Lisa turned to Carter. "That wasn't a proposal. That was an ultimatum." Carter nodded grimly. Get me a secure line to the Security Council. Tell them it's urgent. He looked out the viewport at the gleaming Vexari ship. They think they can come here and bargain for our world's resources. They have no idea who they're dealing with. Security Council leader Diane Powell stood at the head of the table in the underground bunker beneath Geneva. The room was filled with the most powerful people on Earth, all gathered on short notice after Admiral Carter's urgent message. The recordings from the meeting with the Vexari have been shared with all of you, Powell said. We need to decide how Earth responds to this threat. The president of the North American Union leaned forward. Let's be clear. Is this a threat or an offer of alliance? Dr. Lisa Winters, who had been flown in directly from the space station, cleared her throat. Based on my analysis of their language and behavior, this is absolutely a threat. The Vexari aren't asking. They're telling us what they're going to take. Military strategist Colonel Frank Morrison stood up and activated the room's holographic display. We've analyzed the Vexari ship's approach. They didn't just happen to find us. They came directly to Earth, bypassing other resource-rich bodies in our system. This suggests prior knowledge of our planet. You think we've been watched? Asked the Chinese premier. Morrison nodded. Almost certainly. And there's more. He brought up a series of images. These are fragments of communications we intercepted between their ship and what we believe is their home system. Dr. Winter's team has only translated portions, but they mention other acquisitions and resource worlds. The room grew quiet as the implications sank in. Science Director Alan Garcia was next to speak. My team has been studying the Vexari ship. Their technology is advanced, but not incomprehensible. We've detected what appears to be a vulnerability in their shield harmonics. With more data, we might be able to exploit it. Powell looked around the room. We have less than 36 hours before the Vexari expect our answer. I see three options. We can give them what they want. We can try to negotiate, or we can refuse. If we give them our water, billions will die, said the African Union representative. Earth cannot sustain human life with a 30% reduction in water supply. And if we refuse outright? Asked Powell. Admiral Carter's face appeared on the main screen, joining from the space station. Based on their behavior and implied threats, refusal would likely trigger immediate military action. We're not ready for that. Then we negotiate, said the European Federation president. Buy time. Colonel Morrison shook his head. Negotiation from a position of weakness rarely ends well. But time we could use. Powell nodded slowly. So we appear to negotiate while secretly preparing for war. Can we win a war against them? The Indian president's voice was quiet but clear. Garcia exchanged glances with Morrison, with enough time to study their weaknesses and prepare. Possibly. Without that, no. Powell stood straighter. Then our course is clear. We stall for time while preparing for conflict. We need to learn everything we can about the Vexari and develop countermeasures. We'll need a special operations team, Morrison said. Someone to gather intelligence on the Vexari up close. I have just the person, Carter said from the screen. Commander Susan Miller. She leads our best special tactics unit. Powell nodded. Get her team ready. And we need a diplomatic response that buys us time without committing to anything. Dr. Winters smiled slightly. I can help with that. The Vexari seem to value formal procedures. We can propose a series of meetings to fully understand the details of their generous offer. Do it, Powell said. And everyone else, get to work. Earth Defense Forces are now at silent readiness level 1. Admiral Carter, you'll continue diplomatic engagement. Colonel Morrison, coordinate with global military leaders on defense preparations. Director Garcia, I want every scientist on Earth working on Vexari vulnerabilities. As the meeting adjourned, Powell stayed behind with Morrison. Do you think we can win this? She asked quietly. Morrison's face was grim. The Vexari think they're dealing with a primitive species that will roll over at the first sign of superior technology. They're about to learn that humans don't bargain with bullies. He smiled without humor. We choose war instead. Commander Susan Miller studied the holographic display of the Vexari scout ship. Her team of 5 stood around her in the briefing room deep within Earth's lunar base. "Our mission is simple but dangerous," she said. "We need to get aboard that ship, gather intel on Vexari technology and intentions, and get out without being detected." Lieutenant Ryan Jones, her second-in-command, pointed to the ship's outer hull. "How do we get in?" "Their security systems must be advanced." Director Garsh's team found something interesting, Miller replied. "The Vexari use a form of radiation shielding that creates a blind spot near their waste processing units. We can use that." Communications specialist Maria Rodriguez studied the ship's specs, and once we're inside, we split into 2 teams. Jones and I will access their central computer core. Rodriguez, you and specialists Kim and Patel will plant surveillance devices and secure an escape route. "What's our window?" asked Patel. 4 hours during the next diplomatic meeting. Most of the crew will be distracted by the talks. Jones looked concerned. "If we get caught?" Miller's face was serious. "Then Earth loses its best chance to defend itself. Failure is not an option." 3 days later, Miller's team approached the Vexari scout ship in a maintenance pod designed to look like routine station debris. The diplomatic talks had begun an hour earlier, with Dr. Winters asking endless questions about the generous offer from the Vexari. Approaching blind spot, Jones whispered, though there was no need for quiet in the vacuum of space. The pod attached to the hull with barely a tremor. Miller activated the cutting tool that would create their entry point. The metal of the alien ship yielded surprisingly easily. "Remember," Miller said as they prepared to enter, 4 hours maximum. Inside the ship, the air was slightly thicker than Earth normal, with a sweet smell. The team split up as planned. Miller and Jones moved carefully through the corridors, following the path they had memorized from the scans. 2 life forms approaching, Jones whispered, checking his sensor. They ducked into an alcove as 2 Vexari passed by, discussing something in their native language. When the aliens were gone, they continued toward the central computer core. The room was unguarded, just as Garcia had predicted. The Vexari were overconfident. "Keep watch," Miller told Jones as she connected her data extraction device to what appeared to be a main terminal. The alien system responded immediately, data flowing into her device faster than expected. Miller watched as schematics, communications, and tactical information filled her screen. "This is bad," she whispered, seeing images of Earth with marked locations. "These aren't diplomatic plans. They're invasion plans." She downloaded everything she could, heart racing as she saw detailed schematics for human processing facilities and resource extraction sites across Earth. "Miller, we've got company," Jones said urgently. "Multiple Vexari heading this way." "1 more minute," she replied, watching the progress bar. The door to the computer core slid open just as Miller unplugged her device. A tall Vexari officer stood there, looking shocked to see humans. "Run," Miller shouted. They sprinted down the corridor toward their extraction point. Alarms blared throughout the ship. Rodriguez's voice came over the comm. "Commander, we're at the exit point. Hurry." Miller and Jones rounded a corner to find 3 Vexari blocking their path. Jones pushed Miller aside and fired his weapon, dropping 2 aliens. "Go," he shouted. "I'll hold them off." "Not without you," Miller yelled back. Jones looked at her, his face determined. "The mission comes first. Earth needs that data." He pressed his emergency beacon into her hand. "Tell everyone I did my job." Miller wanted to argue but knew he was right. With a final nod to her friend, she ran toward the extraction point. Rodriguez, Kim, and Paddle were waiting. "Where's Jones?" Rodriguez asked. The sound of weapons fire echoed down the corridor. Miller's face was grim. "Giving us a chance. Move." Their escape pod detached from the Vexari ship moments later. As they sped back toward the lunar base, Miller clutched the data device. "Jones gave his life for this," she said quietly. "Let's make sure it wasn't in vain." The Security Council watched in silence as Commander Miller's mission footage played on the large screen. When it ended, the room remained quiet for several moments. "So they never intended to bargain," Powell finally said. "They were planning an invasion all along." Miller nodded grimly. "Yes, Mom. The data we recovered shows detailed plans for complete takeover. They'd done this before to at least 7 other civilizations." Colonel Morrison stood up. "We need to accelerate our preparations. The Vexari know we've infiltrated their ship now. They'll likely move up their timeline." "What about Lieutenant Jones?" asked Carter from his video link. "Confirmed dead," Miller said, her voice tight. "They made an announcement during this morning's diplomatic meeting. They're calling it a terrorist action and demanding the people responsible be handed over." Powell turned to Science Director Garcia. "What have you learned from the technical data?" Garcia brought up several diagrams on the main screen. "Their ships use a shield system that operates on rotating frequencies. There's a millisecond vulnerability during each rotation. If we can time our weapons to hit during that gap, we can penetrate their defenses." "Can we build weapons that precise?" asked Powell. "We already have someone working on it," Garcia replied. "Kevin Hughes, our top weapons engineer. He's making remarkable progress." Morrison pointed to a different section of the screen. "What about their offensive capabilities?" "Their weapons are energy-based, similar to our experimental plasma systems, but more advanced," Garcia explained. "Their targeting systems rely on heat signatures. If we can mask our heat output, we might confuse their weapons." Powell nodded. "Prepare full production of any weapons or defenses you develop. Use whatever resources you need." She turned to Dr. Winters. "How are the diplomatic talks going?" "I'm stalling as much as possible," Winters replied. "Asking for clarifications, suggesting alternative proposals that I know they'll reject, but that take time to consider. But they're growing impatient." "Keep them talking," Powell ordered. "We need every minute we can get." In his laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains, Kevin Hughes worked tirelessly on his new missile system. The data from the Vexari ship had given him exactly what he needed to create a weapon that could penetrate their shields. "Run Simulation 27, he told his computer. On the screen, a virtual missile approached a simulated Vexari shield. This time, instead of bouncing off, it passed through at exactly the right moment and struck the ship. Hughes smiled for the first time in days. "We've got it." His assistant, Olivia Reyes, looked up from her workstation. "How soon can we build them?" "Assembly lines are already being converted. First batch will be ready in 48 hours. Admiral Carter faced the Vexari ambassador across the diplomatic table. The tension between them was thick enough to cut. "Your infiltration of our vessel is a serious breach of diplomatic protocol," Zorteth said, his skin patterns dark with anger. "We demand the perpetrators be surrendered to us for justice." Carter kept his face neutral. "We're investigating the incident. Many of our people are concerned about the terms of your proposal. Perhaps if you could offer more details about your intentions." "Our intentions are simple," Zorteth replied. "You will provide the requested resources or face consequences. Your delay tactics grow tiresome, Admiral." "We're not delaying," Carter lied smoothly. "Earth's governance is complex. Decisions take time. Perhaps you need motivation to decide more quickly." The ambassador's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Observe." On the view screen behind him, a small Vexari warship appeared near Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. Without warning, it fired on the unmanned research station orbiting there. The station exploded in a brilliant flash. "That was unoccupied," Zorteth said. "Next time, we may choose a target with human life forms. You have 24 hours to accept our terms." After the Vexari left, Carter immediately contacted Powell. "They're done talking. The attack has begun." Powell's face was grim but determined. "Then it's time we showed them humanity's response. Deploy the fleet, Admiral. Operation Defiance is now active. Across Earth and throughout the solar system, military forces that had been quietly preparing moved into position. The time for diplomacy was over. Humanity had chosen war. The orbital diplomatic station Unity gleamed against the darkness of space. Inside, humans moved with purpose, setting up the formal surrender ceremony that the Vexeri had demanded. Only a few people knew the truth. There would be no surrender today. Dr. Lisa Winters adjusted her formal diplomatic attire and rehearsed her speech one more time. After 2 weeks of delays and negotiations, Earth had officially accepted the Vexeri terms. The aliens believed they had won without firing a shot. "Are you ready?" Admiral Carter asked, entering the preparation room. Winters nodded. "The translation is perfect. They'll understand exactly what we mean." "And our forces?" "In position," Carter confirmed. "Hughes missiles have been distributed to all ships. The moment you finish your speech, we strike." A junior officer entered. "Sir, the Vexari delegation is docked. High Commander Krelvor himself is leading them." Carter smiled grimly. "Even better than we hoped. Their entire command structure in one place." The delegation hall was designed to impress, with Earth's flags from all nations lining the walls. The Vexeri entered with confident strides, clearly believing they were about to claim victory. High Commander Krelvor stood taller than the others, his elaborate armor glinting under the lights. "Welcome," Carter said, bowing slightly. "We are prepared to formalize our agreement." Krelvor's skin patterns shifted in what humans now recognize as satisfaction. "Your wisdom in accepting our generous terms will be noted. The Conclave protects those who understand their proper place." Diplomatic representatives from Earth's major nations were seated around the large ceremonial table. Powell watched from Earth via secure video link, ready to give the final order if needed. Carter gestured to Winters. "Our chief diplomatic officer will read the terms as we understand them, to ensure there are no misunderstandings." Winters stepped forward with a formal document. The Vexeri watched with their 4 eyes blinking in anticipation. "The people of Earth," she began in English, "recognize the power of the Vexari Conclave and its presence throughout the galaxy." She then switched to perfect Vexeri language, her voice using tones and harmonics that only the aliens could fully appreciate. The Vexeri delegation straightened in surprise at hearing their native tongue spoken so well. "Humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not bargain with oppressors. Today, you learn what happens when you threaten our world." Confusion and then anger spread across the Vexeri faces. Krelvor stood abruptly. "What trickery is this?" At that moment, throughout the solar system, Earth's hidden fleet emerged from stealth positions. Ships that had been disguised as asteroids, hidden behind moons, or running with minimal power signatures suddenly powered up their systems. On the command ship UES Valiant, Admiral Sam Fletcher gave the order. "All ships, commence firing. Target their command vessels first." Hughes missiles streaked through space, precisely timed to hit the Vexeri shields during their microsecond vulnerability. The first volley struck the Vexeri flagship before they even raised their alert status. Back on Unity Station, chaos erupted. The Vexari guards reached for their weapons, but station security was faster, having prepared for this moment. Carter tackled Winters to the floor as energy beams crisscrossed the room. "Get to the evacuation pod," he shouted, pulling her to her feet. Krelvor roared in anger. "You primitive fools. You have doomed your species." Carter fired his sidearm, hitting the Vexeri leader in the shoulder. "No, we've just decided to fight instead of submit." Security Chief Bennett and his team provided covering fire as the human delegation retreated to the secure area of the station. Outside, the battle had fully engaged, with Earth ships striking hard and fast against the surprised Vexari fleet. Powell watched the tactical displays from her command center deep beneath Geneva. All defense grids activate, all military forces at full readiness. This is not a drill. Across Earth, missile systems, energy shields, and fighter squadrons activated. The plan they had worked on for weeks was now in full motion. In space, Hughes missiles continued to find their targets. The Vexari, caught off guard by humanity's coordinated attack, struggled to mount an effective defense. The battle for Earth had begun, and humanity had struck the first devastating blow. The space around Earth lit up with weapons fire. The initial human strike had been devastatingly effective. 12 Vexari ships were already disabled or destroyed, including one of their command vessels. But the aliens recovered quickly from their surprise. Second Vexari fleet incoming, reported the sensor officer on the UES Valiant. At least 30 ships emerging from faster-than-light travel near Mars orbit. Admiral Fletcher's face remained calm despite the bad news. They had reinforcements waiting, just as we suspected. He opened a channel to all Earth ships. "This is Admiral Fletcher. Reinforcements have arrived. Switch to defense pattern Delta." The human fleet regrouped, forming protective clusters around Earth's orbital defenses. Hughes missiles had given them a strong opening advantage, but their supply was limited, and the Vexari were adapting. "They're adjusting their shield frequencies," reported Lieutenant Commander Ramirez. "Our missiles are becoming less effective." Fletcher nodded grimly. "We knew they would adapt. Time for Phase 2. On Earth's surface, Colonel Morrison watched as dropships descended through the atmosphere. The Vexari had launched a ground invasion, targeting several locations around the globe. The largest force was heading for the Pacific Northwest region of North America. "All units in position," Morrison said into his comm. "Remember, these aren't like any enemy we've faced before. Stick to the training." The first wave of alien soldiers landed in the forests outside Seattle. They moved with mechanical precision, their armor making them look more like robots than living beings. Earth's defense forces waited in hidden positions, using the camouflage technology developed from studying the Vexari stealth systems. "Hold," Morrison ordered as the aliens advanced. "Wait for them to reach the sensor net." When the Vexari troops crossed into the prepared killing zone, Morrison gave the signal. "Now." Hidden weapon emplacements activated, targeting the specific weaknesses in Vexari armor that Commander Miller's team had identified. The aliens fell by the dozens before they realized they were under attack. But the Vexari recovered quickly. They returned fire with devastating energy weapons that turned trees to ash and melted the ground itself. Earth soldiers fell back to secondary positions. "They're stronger than we expected," Morrison told Powell over a secure channel. "We're holding for now, but barely." "The same story in orbit," Powell replied. "Keep them contained as long as possible. We need time for Hughes to finish his work." In his underground laboratory, Kevin Hughes worked frantically to modify his missile guidance systems. The Vexari adaptation to his first design had been faster than expected. "They're learning our patterns," he told his team. "We need to make the targeting completely random within the vulnerability window." Olivia Reyes looked up from her workstation. "That will reduce accuracy by at least 30%. "Better than having shields that don't penetrate at all," Hughes replied. "Upload the new targeting protocols to all remaining missiles." His comm unit beeped. "Hughes here. This is Commander Miller. I need something that can take down a Vexari command ship from the inside." Hughes paused. "You're not planning what I think you are." "That's exactly what I'm planning," Miller responded. "Can you help me?" Hughes thought for a moment. "Come to Lab 3. I have something that might work." In orbit, the battle had turned against the human fleet. Despite their brave fight, the sheer number of Vexari reinforcements was overwhelming. The UES Valiant shuddered as another hit broke through their defenses. "Shields down to 12%, reported Ramirez. "We can't take much more of this." Admiral Fletcher stared at the tactical display. They had lost 8 ships already, with many more damage. But the Vexari had lost 17, a much better exchange rate than anyone had predicted. "We're hurting them," Fletcher said. "Even as they push us back, we're hurting them badly." His communications officer looked up suddenly. "Sir, I'm picking up transmissions between Vexari ships. There seems to be some kind of argument happening. Can you translate it? Fletcher asked. Partially. Something about excessive losses and underestimation. One commander is questioning their attack strategy. Fletcher smiled for the first time since the battle began. They thought this would be easy. They're discovering humans don't surrender so easily. A massive explosion lit up the view screen as one of Earth's defense platforms detonated, taking 3 Vexeri ships with it in a suicide blast. We may lose this battle, Fletcher said quietly, but they'll remember this day forever. Humanity will not go quietly. 3 weeks into the war, both sides were exhausted. Earth's orbital defenses were mostly destroyed. 5 major cities lay in ruins from Vexeri bombardment. The alien ground forces had secured footholds on 3 continents, but the cost to the Vexeri had been staggering. Nearly half their invasion fleet destroyed, and thousands of their soldiers killed. In the underground command center, the remains of Earth's leadership gathered for what might be their final strategy session. "We can't keep this up much longer," Morrison said, his uniform torn and dirty from the front lines. "We've lost too many people, too much equipment." Powell nodded grimly. "What about the Vexari? How are they holding up?" Dr. Winters, who had been monitoring alien communications, looked up from her station. "That's actually interesting. I've detected unusual traffic between their fleet and their homeworld. There seems to be some kind of internal conflict happening." "What kind of conflict?" asked Carter, who had survived the battle on Unity Station. "Some Vexeri leaders want to withdraw from Earth. They're arguing that the resource cost is too high compared to what they would gain." Winters looked almost hopeful. "This isn't going according to their usual conquest pattern. We're the first species to fight back effectively. Can we exploit this somehow?" Powell asked. Fletcher, joining by video from his damaged flagship, spoke up. "If we could strike directly at their homeworld, it might force those advocating withdrawal to win their internal debate." "Strike their homeworld?" Morrison looked shocked. "We can barely hold them off here. How could we possibly reach their star system?" Commander Miller, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "I have a plan, but it's risky." All eyes turned to her. "Hughes has developed a special device that can disrupt the Vexeri neural network. Their ships and soldiers are all connected through this network. If we can plant this device on their central command station, we could temporarily disable their entire military." "And how do we get it there?" Carter asked. Miller's face was determined. "We steal a Vexeri ship." 2 days later, Miller and a small team including Rodriguez, Reyes, and 3 other Special Forces soldiers approached a damaged Vexeri scout ship that had been forced down in the Australian outback. "Security systems are still active," Rodriguez said, scanning the ship, "but life support is damaged. No life signs inside." "Perfect," Miller replied. They moved carefully, using the techniques they had learned from studying Vexeri technology. Within an hour, they were inside. "Can we fly this thing?" asked Rice, looking at the alien controls. Miller nodded. "The data we stole in our first mission included basic flight controls. It won't be pretty, but we can manage." As they prepared the ship, Powell addressed all Earth communication channels. Her face, tired but resolute, appeared on screens worldwide. "People of Earth, today we launch our most daring mission yet. For 3 weeks, we have shown the Vexari that humans will not surrender our world without a fight. They thought they could come here and take what they wanted. They thought wrong." She continued, her voice growing stronger. "Commander Miller and her team are taking the fight directly to the enemy. While they do, we must continue to resist here on Earth. Hold your positions. Protect each other. Show the galaxy that humanity will never be conquered." Millions watched and listened, drawing strength from her words even as Vexeri bombs fell on their cities. In his lab, Kevin Hughes made final adjustments to his neural disruptor device. It was smaller than he would have liked, its range more limited, but it was the best he could do with the time and resources available. "Will it work?" Miller asked as he handed it to her. Hughes managed a tired smile. It will disrupt their network for about 6 minutes. After that, the system will reset. 6 minutes is all we need, Miller said, securing the device. Long enough to send the message that nowhere in the galaxy is safe from human retribution. As their stolen ship rose from Earth's atmosphere, they could see the battle still raging below. Fire and destruction spread across continents, but human resistance continued everywhere. Preparing for faster-than-light jump, Rodriguez announced. Miller took a deep breath. Let's show these aliens what happens when they pick a fight with humans. The stars blurred around them as the ship accelerated, carrying Earth's hopes with it toward the heart of the Vexari conclave. The Vexari Central Command Station orbited a gas giant in their home system. It was massive, nearly the size of Earth's moon, with thousands of ships docked around it. From their stolen vessel, Miller and her team watched with awe and fear. "They're hailing us," Rodriguez said, monitoring the communication system. "Send the response codes we found in their database," Miller ordered, "and keep that neural disruptor ready." The stolen ship approached the station without incident. The Vexari believed it was one of their damaged vessels returning for repairs. Miller felt her heart racing as they docked successfully. "Remember," she told her team, "we have one shot at this. Once we activate the disruptor, every Vexari in the system will know something's wrong. We'll have 6 minutes to reach their central control room and secure it." The team moved through the station, their armor modified to resemble Vexari equipment. They passed dozens of aliens who barely glanced at them. The station was a hub of activity, with officers rushing to coordinate the war effort against Earth. When they reached the central control section, Rodriguez set up the neural disruptor while Reyes hacked the door controls. "Ready," Rodriguez whispered. Miller nodded. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Now." Rodriguez activated the device. Throughout the station, Vexari suddenly stopped moving. Some fell to the ground. Others stood frozen in place. The neural network that connected them had been temporarily disrupted. "Move," Miller ordered. They burst into the control room, quickly securing it. On the main screen, they could see the battle around Earth. The Vexari fleet had suddenly stopped attacking, their ships drifting aimlessly without coordination. "Send the message," Miller told Rodriguez. "All channels." On Earth, Admiral Carter watched in amazement as the Vexari ships stopped firing. Then, on every communication channel, Miller's voice came through. "This is Commander Susan Miller of Earth. We have taken control of the Vexari Central Command Station. We have disabled their neural network. To the leaders of the Vexari Conclave, hear me. The war ends now, or we destroy your entire command structure." In orbit, Admiral Fletcher immediately ordered all human ships to hold fire, but maintain combat readiness. In the underground command center, Powell and her advisors watched the screens with hope for the first time in weeks. "She did it," Carter said quietly. "She actually did it." In the Vexari command station, Miller faced the High Council of the Conclave. The 6-minute disruption had ended, but by then, her team had secured enough of the station to maintain control. "You cannot hope to hold this station forever," said Grand Overseer Val Schur, the highest-ranking Vexari leader. "More forces will come." "We don't need to hold it forever," Miller replied. "Just long enough to make our point. Your forces are fighting a losing battle on Earth. You've lost half your invasion fleet. Your own commanders want to withdraw." "The Conclave does not retreat," Val Schur growled. "Then the Conclave will fall," Miller said simply. "We've uploaded the plans for more neural disruptors to Earth. We know how your technology works now. This is just the beginning of what we can do." The Vexari leaders looked at each other, their skin patterns shifting rapidly in what Miller now recognized as concern. After a long silence, Val Schur spoke again. "What are your terms?" 2 months later, Admiral Carter stood on the deck of the UES Defiance as the formal surrender ceremony took place. The remaining Vexari ships were leaving Earth orbit, heading back to their own territory. On the main viewing screen, Powell addressed the people of Earth. Today marks a new chapter in human history. The Vexari Conclave has unconditionally withdrawn from our system and recognized Earth's sovereignty. More importantly, we have established the Interstellar Defense Initiative to ensure humanity is never threatened again. In the background, communications from other star systems were pouring in. Species that had been subjugated by the Vexari were reaching out, seeking alliances with the humans who had done the impossible. Miller, now wearing the uniform of a newly promoted admiral, watched as the last Vexari ship disappeared into faster-than-light travel. "They thought they could come here and take what they wanted," she said to Carter. "They thought we would surrender or bargain away our future." Carter nodded. "Instead, we chose war, and we won." Miller looked at the stars, thinking of Jones and the many others who had given their lives. And now the real work begins, building a future where no one would dare threaten Earth again. Across the galaxy, word spread quickly. The humans of Earth were not to be trifled with. Those who thought they could bargain with humanity had learned a costly lesson. When pushed, humans would choose.